Right, okay, so once we're happy with the arrangement of the track, we usually go make a cup of tea, have 5 minutes away from it, or maybe do something completely different before we start going into the mixdown stage. Because although I mix as I go along, so as I'm going along in my track, I'm always adjusting the levels, adjusting the EQs and things like that, just to keep on top of it so it sounds well as a whole. It's always good to come back to your track and mix it down with fresh ears. So either go have a cup of tea before you do this, get some air, get outside, or save it and, open it tomorrow or another day and just come back to it, because you tend to find once you've got clean ears, you notice things that stand out in your track and either should be there should be more of something, shouldn't be enough of something or whatever. And that's because you get fatigue on your ears from listening to music over and over again. And when you're listening to loud music, it doesn't take long for your ears to get sort of woolly and dull. So don't always, don't have your tunes blasting out all the time when you're making them, because you don't just damage your hearing, but you're sort of fighting a losing battle when it comes to like mixing down and listening to how sounds should be and things. So I don't want to sound like your mum telling you to turn it down, but turn it down. You don't need it too loud, especially when you're mixing down. Okay, so set your volume at a nice level. We don't want it too loud. And then bring your mixer up. So as we were going along and arranging everything, I've put everything into the right buses. So like as I said before, we've got all our drums going down into our drum mix here. I've got the effects and everything going into lead mix 1. I've got most of the leads from the track going into lead mix 2, and then I've got like the sub and things just going out of bass mix 5. Now, in a lot of our tracks, I work with 7 buses. I've usually got drum mix, lead mix 1, lead mix 2, and that's for all the variations of leads that I've got going on in my track and like other keys and things like that. I've got my bass mix, and then I have an effect and additional, which is usually just for like my white noises effects, things like that, because it's nice to sort of treat them a little bit differently, maybe add a bit of spread onto your effects and stuff as a group. And I've also got a vocal channel, because it's good to keep your vocals completely separate anyway, because you can mix them into your track once you've got your track right or whatever. Okay, so the best thing to start with is just to solo the drum mix. And if we turn everything we've got off on the drum mix channel, like we've got the SSL compressor on there and we've got the Fab Filter EQ, just to add a little bit more clarity and punch to it. And then we just select all our drums, so everything that we've got going through there. What we've got on there, we don't want that. We've got that big snare going on. That's going through the drums as well. Make sure all the channels that you want to go through that drum channel have got all the buses to 22. Now you can do this all at once, so if we next check your lead mix, make sure everything that needs to be going through 23, like your white noises we've got there, the effects and everything, they're all going through the right bus, and so on. So then straight away everything's a little bit tidier. So if we solo the drum mix and we go to the drums, we've already mixed the drums in this, so if I just solo everything, we can listen to it all as a whole. If my computer catches up. There we go. There we go, so our levels are already balanced nicely in that. But what's good to happen is, if you turn everything down, okay, so if we just bring everything down that we've got going on in there, okay, and start with your kick drum. So the starting point of mixing down needs to be your kick drum. And what we do is we put that at 0 dB, okay, and, I usually start with my buses at around -6, okay. Now, I explained earlier, if you start with your buses at -6, you're giving yourself a lot of headroom there, so you can be a bit more generous with your channels, and it allows you to mix in this way where you can leave your main kick at 0 dB. Okay, so all we do is, once we've got our basses and kick, there we go. Now you can see it's just hitting below 0 dB, there's about a dB of headroom left on there. All we do is we put a limiter on there, and all we do is tickle it till it just brings it up to 0. You don't need to squash it, don't overdo it, and you can see on this. There we go. All we're doing is just, bringing the volume up to 0 dB. So if your kick's the loudest point in your track, you can mix everything else up to it, and your kick will always be dominant. You'll never lose it in the mix. Okay, so the same applies for your filtered kick. It doesn't really matter if it's if that's hitting 0, because that's just going to be a filtered part of the track. But when the main kick comes in, you want that to hit 0 dB. So if we just play this, you can save the filtered one. See, it's not far off, but you know, you get what I'm saying. So as soon as you've got your kick there, you can start mixing everything else up to it and getting your levels right. So. There we go, so I've just roughly done that, but you can mess around for, you know, as long as you want. Just get everything balanced right, and once you've found a balance, we can go back to the drum channel, and then we can treat it again. So we'll add that little bit of EQ on there. See that little bit of EQ we've got on there. We've just shaved off a few of the unwanted frequencies from down below, which is just going to muddy up your mix. We've added the punch, so everything thuds really nicely, and then we've just added a nice little bit of fizzy stuff at the top. And then next we've just put the SSL compressor, which I explained to you earlier about what it does, and then that just glues everything together now. There we go, so that's pretty much it for my drums. Don't really do much more to them, because I think, you know, like I say again, keep everything simple. If it doesn't need touch, if it's not broken, don't touch it. We've just generally glued them together and made them sound good as a whole. Okay, so once we've got our drums mixed, we need to look at getting everything else sitting in there. So another thing to get right is to get your kick and your bass. Okay, so we need to bring the bass levels up to the kick. So if we go back to the mixer and we solo our kick again, there we go. And then we can solo our bass channels as well. There you go, so once you get your kick and your sub side chaining and working together, you know, it's a good base to sort of put everything else around it. So that's just one of the quiet subs we've got underneath there. But this is where you can mess around with your LFO tools and get everything sat really well with the kick. Okay, so after that we're going to bring in sort of like the main sort of mega saw bass that we've got there. So if we listen to these together. Just by adjusting the LFO tool that we've got on there, we can just sort of make it duck and fit a little better. Okay, so if we listen to that with all the drums as well, we solo that. There you go, so it's just a case of sort of like soloing things, listening to them together until you get things to sort of sit well and all sort of sit in their own place. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the breakdown. So I know we've got more elements going on in there, but it's, you know, it's the same for everything. Just as long as you're giving yourself, you know, soloing it against your kick and everything sounds the right level and it's got its own space in the mix, you're okay. Now you tend to find if something doesn't fit and it sounds muddy, you could be either over or under EQing it. So just, you know, make sure you're taking off everything at the bottom and you know, you're taking things off at the top that you don't need, because otherwise you're just leaving stuff in there that you can't hear, but it's going to leave no room in your mix, and it's just going to, like, you know, cause this like fluff in there which you don't need. So, you know, always keep checking your EQs and just keep comparing your levels against each other. Okay, so on our breakdown, should be pretty good anyway, because we did all the sort of leveling of the leads when we did the sort of lead layering. So a good thing you can do is, if you've got your lead layers sounding good, and if we stick to them 4 there we go. Now you can use the group tool on here, and say if we select group 1, and as well you need to make sure if you open your group settings, your groups are active. Okay, just click that little tick box up there, and then what this does is it keeps them all glued together when we've got them working. Oops, hang on. There we go. There we go. If we click editing on, and what it does is, if you move any of them levels, they all move together. It's a really cool mixing tool that you can use, because as soon as you start grouping your sounds, as soon as you've got your levels right, we can just stick a group on there. It sticks them all together, so if you just want to bring the whole thing down, you just bring one of them and it moves a lot. So that's a really nice mixing tool that you can use. Okay, so once we've got all our levels right, which, you know, I could talk you through all this, but it's all pretty much the same all the way through. You know, get your levels right, and then just keep listening to it a couple of times. Now, another thing that I always do is I always save this Mixdown as a separate project to my original arrangement. So if we just go to File, Save As, you know, we call this one Mixdown, or like, you know, Mixdown 2 or whatever. It's always good to do a couple of mixes, because, you know, in different moods you're in, I suppose, you can mix things down slightly different, or if you've been working on other things, if you've got things on your mind, you know, so just do a couple of mixdowns, and then you can listen back to them and sort of A and B them, and work out which one works best for you.